Jace's boots made a quiet echo on the hard floor as he walked through the alien city, the weight of his mission pressing on his shoulders. The Xylo Empire was vast, its queen known for her power and strength. Jace had been sent as part of a diplomatic team to establish a treaty. What he hadn't anticipated was being captured by the Queen's guards the moment he stepped foot on the planet. He stood now, alone in a grand hall, surrounded by tall, dark walls that shimmered like they were alive. Alien symbols decorated the surfaces and the faint hum of machinery filled the air. The silence was oppressive, as though the very walls were watching him. Two guards stood in front of him, tall and intimidating, their alien features hidden beneath helmets. They pointed long, sleek weapons at him, their fingers resting on the triggers. Jace remained calm, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. His heart raced, but his face was a mask of neutrality. He had faced dangerous situations before, but this felt different. He was far from home, on an unfamiliar world, facing an unknown enemy. The stakes were high, and his survival was anything but certain. The doors at the far end of the hall creaked open. The sound sent a chill down Jace's spine. The Queen was entering. She was magnificent. The Xylo Queen, Ariana, stood tall and regal, her alien features soft yet fierce. Her skin was a deep shade of violet, her eyes glowing with an inner fire that seemed to pierce through Jace's very soul. Her hair was long and silver, cascading down her back like a waterfall of starlight. She was a creature of power, and her presence filled the room with an energy that was hard to ignore. Jace stood his ground as she walked toward him, her every step measured and deliberate. The guards stepped aside, bowing their heads in respect. Ariana's gaze locked onto him, her eyes narrowing slightly as she took him in. The tension in the room grew thicker with each passing second. "You are a human," she said, her voice low and commanding, a strange accent twisting her words. "I did not expect to see one of your kind here." Jace swallowed, trying to steady his breathing. He had rehearsed for this moment, but nothing had prepared him for the weight of the Queen's gaze. He spoke carefully, knowing that one wrong word could mean his end. "We came in peace, Your Majesty," Jace said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "Our people seek a treaty, an alliance. We have no interest in conflict." Ariana tilted her head, studying him like an insect under a microscope. Her eyes softened, just a fraction, but the suspicion never fully left her face. "A treaty," she repeated, almost as if testing the word on her tongue. "And why should I believe the words of a human?" Jace's mind raced, trying to find the right words, the words that would convince her to spare his life. He knew he had to tread carefully. One misstep could mean the end. "We've been through a lot to get here, Your Majesty," he said, his voice steady. "Our worlds have suffered. We are trying to build something better, not just for us, but for everyone. We're offering peace, not war." For a moment, Ariana didn't speak. She simply stared at him, her gaze intense and unreadable. Jace couldn't tell what she was thinking, but he knew he couldn't break eye contact. He had to show her that he wasn't afraid. He wasn't just some soldier here to invade her world. He was here to make a difference. The silence stretched on, growing thicker and more unbearable. Jace could feel the weight of her eyes on him, the pressure building with every passing second. Then, without warning, Ariana's expression shifted. She didn't smile, but the hardness in her gaze softened slightly. The tension in the room seemed to lessen just a bit, but not enough to let Jace feel entirely safe. "I do not trust you," she said at last, her voice colder than before. "But I will give you a chance. If your words are true, then you will prove it." Jace nodded, relief flooding him briefly. He knew this was his opportunity. He had to take it. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he said. "I will do whatever it takes to prove my sincerity." Ariana didn't respond, but instead she gave a subtle nod to one of her guards. The guard stepped forward, his weapon still raised, and motioned for Jace to follow. Jace hesitated, unsure of what came next. His heart pounded in his chest as he glanced at the Queen one last time. She was still watching him, her gaze intense, her thoughts unreadable. As Jace walked, the sound of footsteps echoed behind him, each step more uncertain than the last. He had no idea what awaited him, but he knew one thing for sure. He had just made a deal with the queen of the Xylo, and his survival was now tied to whatever she had in store for him. Just as he reached the door, something caught his eye, a small movement behind him. He turned, and for the first time he noticed the two young figures standing just behind the queen. They were women, both much younger than Ariana, but there was no mistaking who they were. Princess Zara and Princess Nyla. Their eyes were locked on him, and for a brief moment their gazes met. There was a quiet tension in the air as Jace studied the princesses. They were beautiful, both of them, with soft features and a strange, otherworldly elegance. But there was something else about them, something familiar. Zara, the older of the two, stood with a grace that matched her mother's, her eyes sharp and calculating. Nyla, on the other hand, was more playful, her gaze full of curiosity. Jace felt his heart race. Something in the air had shifted, and it wasn't just the queen's presence. The princesses were watching him, and their attention was both a blessing and a curse. Before Jace could speak, Ariana spoke again, but this time her voice was different. It was quieter, more hesitant, and there was a flash of something in her eyes. "Take him to the council chamber," the queen ordered, her voice colder now than before. Jace nodded, but before he could take another step, something stopped him. A movement behind him, the faintest shuffle of feet, and then a voice, soft yet powerful, broke the silence. "Mother," Princess Zara said. "Why are you doing this?" Jace turned back, confusion filling his mind. What was this about? What did the princess mean by that? The queen's eyes shifted to her daughters, and for the first time a crack appeared in her unshakable mask of authority. She froze, her body stiffening, as though struck by some unseen force. For just a moment, the guards lowered their weapons and the entire room stood still. A silence stretched between them all, and Jace could only wonder what the future held for him as the queen gazed at her daughters, frozen, caught between duty and something far more personal. Jace followed the guards through the maze of halls within the royal palace, trying to keep his nerves under control. His mind raced, his thoughts tangled in confusion. What had just happened? Why had the queen frozen when she saw her daughters? And why had the princesses been watching him so intently? The palace was even more magnificent up close. The walls were covered in intricate alien designs, some shimmering with light as if they were alive. The air smelled faintly of something, floral, but it was mixed with the scent of metallic machinery. It was a place of power and wealth, a far cry from the simple structures Jace had grown up with. Everything about this world seemed foreign, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was an outsider in every sense. The guards led him into a large room, the council chamber, where he was ordered to stand in the center. He glanced around, noting the tall, sweeping windows that offered a view of the city below. Despite the grandeur, there was an unsettling chill in the air. It wasn't just the coldness of the room, it was the tension that lingered, like a storm about to break. Moments later, the queen and her daughters entered, their presence almost overwhelming. Ariana, the queen, moved with a grace that demanded respect. Her posture was stiff and her eyes narrowed as she looked at Jace, who still stood silently, waiting for whatever would come next. But it was her daughters who caught his attention. Princess Zara, the older of the two, stepped forward first. She was taller than her sister, her posture regal and commanding. There was no denying she was the queen's daughter. Her presence radiated power and authority just like her mother's, but there was a softness in her gaze as she looked at Jace, a hint of something more. Was it curiosity, or something deeper? Nyla, the younger princess, was different. She was smaller, her features softer, yet she had a quiet strength about her. She looked at Jace with a mix of wonder and caution, as if trying to decide what to make of him. The queen, Ariana, took her seat at the head of the room, her eyes still locked on Jace. For a moment she didn't speak, but simply observed him, as though weighing him against something in her mind. Jace stood tall, refusing to show any fear. He had faced danger before, but something about this moment felt different. He was no longer just a soldier in a foreign land. Now he was entangled in the royal affairs of an alien empire, and his actions, his very presence, could change everything. Finally, the Queen spoke, her voice cold and clear, but there was an edge to it that Jace couldn't quite place. "You have already seen more than I intended you to, human," she said, her eyes narrowing. "You may have saved your life for now, but know this. Your fate is still uncertain. My daughters, they have a fascination with you, and I cannot allow that to cloud my judgment." Jace blinked, taken aback by the Queen's words. He had expected to face anger or distrust, but this was something else. What did she mean by fascination, and why was she so concerned about it? Before he could speak, Princess Zara stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "Mother, don't be so harsh on him," she said, her voice smooth but firm. "He's not our enemy. He didn't come here to cause trouble." Ariana shot her daughter a look that was sharp enough to silence anyone else, but Zara didn't back down. Instead, she stood her ground, her gaze unwavering. Jace watched them, confused. What was this, a disagreement, a power struggle? The dynamic between the Queen and her daughters was strange. Ariana, the powerful Queen, and her daughters who seemed to hold some kind of sway over her. It was as though they were not just a family, but players in a political game that was much larger than him. Nyla, who had been quiet up until now, spoke softly, her voice almost timid but with a hint of curiosity. "I want to know more about him, Mother, about his people, his world. The humans are so different from us. Don't you think we should learn more about them?" Her eyes flickered briefly to Jace, and for a second, he thought he saw a glimmer of something in her gaze. A connection, maybe? It was hard to say. The Queen's gaze softened for just a moment, but she quickly masked it with her usual cold demeanor. "You are too trusting, Nyla," she said, her voice firm. "Humans are unpredictable. We do not know what they truly want. This one may speak of peace, but he is still a soldier. He represents a force we cannot ignore." Jace could feel the tension building again, the room growing thick with unspoken words. The princesses, however, didn't seem to be deterred. They looked at him with curiosity, and Jace couldn't help but feel like they were silently making their own judgment about him. "I know what you think, Mother," Zara said, her tone soft but resolute. "But maybe this human is different. Maybe he is here for a reason beyond what we understand. Perhaps this is an opportunity for us to learn, to change." Ariana's gaze flicked to her daughter, her expression hardening. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, Nyla interrupted. "Can we at least hear him out?" Nyla asked, her voice carrying more weight than Jace expected. "We could learn something. Maybe we could find a way to work with him." Jace stood silent, watching the exchange unfold before him. His heart was pounding in his chest, not from fear, but from the strange sense of responsibility that was building inside him. The princesses seemed to believe in him, in his intentions. Could he really live up to their faith? Could he truly make peace between their worlds? The Queen's eyes flickered between her daughters and Jace, her face unreadable. For a long moment she said nothing, her hands clenched on the armrest of her throne. Finally she sighed, her voice quiet but heavy with decision. "Very well," Ariana said, her gaze still fixed on Jace. "You will have the chance to speak, but understand this. If you lie, if you betray us, there will be no second chances." Jace nodded, relief flooding him. This was his opportunity. This was his chance to prove that the humans were not just another threat to be dealt with. He could make a difference here, if only he could find the right words. As he took a deep breath and prepared to speak, he couldn't shake the feeling that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The Queen and her daughters were not the only ones with power on this world, and he was about to find out just how dangerous this power struggle would become. The next few days passed in a blur for Jace. He spent most of his time in the royal palace under constant guard. The tension between the Queen, her daughters, and him was palpable, but it was clear that the situation was shifting. The Queen had allowed him to speak, to present his case for peace, and now Jace found himself in a delicate position. His every move was being watched, not just by the Queen, but by her daughters, who seemed to be growing increasingly interested in his presence. Jace could feel the eyes of the princesses on him wherever he went. Zara, the older princess, was particularly focused. She had a sharp mind, and it was clear she was trying to understand his world. She often asked him questions about Earth, about humanity, and about the strange creatures that populated their planet. At first, Jace had been cautious, unsure of what to share. But as the days passed, he realized that Zara wasn't just asking out of curiosity. She was trying to learn, to understand. It was a rare quality for someone of her position, someone who was clearly accustomed to power. Nyla, on the other hand, was more reserved. She watched Jace with wide, innocent eyes, her questions gentler, more personal. There was something in her gaze, something soft, almost vulnerable. Jace had caught her staring at him more than once, her mind clearly elsewhere. She was always kind, always polite, but there was an air of quiet wonder about her. One afternoon, as Jace was walking through the palace gardens, he was approached by Zara. She was alone, her usual royal entourage nowhere to be seen. This sudden change in her behavior caught Jace off guard. He had always seen her as the confident, authoritative figure, the future ruler who would likely follow in her mother's footsteps. But today, she seemed different. "You're not what I expected," she said, her voice soft but firm. She stood beside him, her gaze sweeping over the lush greenery that surrounded them. The garden was a strange sight. Alien plants of various shapes and colors grew alongside flowers that resembled nothing Jace had ever seen. It was as though the world itself was a reflection of the people who ruled it. Jace glanced at her, unsure of how to respond. "What do you mean?" Zara tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing in thought. "You speak of peace, of alliances. But I know you're kind, human. You've fought wars. You've destroyed worlds. What makes you think we should trust you?" Jace's heart sank. He had expected the question, but it didn't make it any easier to answer. He had spent most of his life as a soldier, trained to fight, to protect, to kill if necessary. His entire life had been shaped by war, by conflict. But that didn't mean he wanted it anymore. He had seen enough of it to last a lifetime. "I don't expect you to trust me," Jace said quietly, "but I hope you'll listen. I've seen war. I've been part of it. I've seen what it does to people, to worlds. I've lost more than I can count, and I've learned that peace is the only way forward. If we keep fighting, we destroy everything, ourselves, the ones we love, everything we've built." Zara regarded him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke again, her voice more thoughtful. "You sound like my mother," she said. "She believes that power and strength are the only things that matter. She would never understand your words, but I do." Jace was taken aback. "You do?" Zara nodded. "I've seen the pain in her eyes, the way she carries the weight of the throne. It's not easy being the queen. It's not easy being the one in charge. She believes that control is the key to survival, but I'm not so sure anymore." Jace felt a flicker of hope. "Maybe you're right," he said. "Maybe we need to change how we see things, not just for our worlds, but for the future of our people." Zara glanced at him, her gaze intense. "That's why I'm speaking with you. I'm not sure what the right path is yet, but I want to understand. I want to believe that we can do something different, something better." Jace nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. He wasn't alone in this. Zara, despite her royal status, was questioning everything she had been taught. She wasn't just a figurehead waiting to inherit power. She was a person with doubts, with hope, just like him. They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the rustle of the alien trees in the breeze. Finally, Zara spoke again, her tone lighter. "I'll see what I can do, but you'll have to prove that you're not like the others, that your people can be trusted. I can't promise anything yet, but I'm willing to help." Jace felt a surge of gratitude, but he knew he couldn't take this opportunity lightly. He had to make sure his people's intentions were clear, and he had to convince the Queen as well. But with Zara's support, he might just have a chance. As Zara walked away, Jace found himself alone once again, but this time, it didn't feel as suffocating. He had allies, even if they were in unexpected places. Zara and Nyla were both searching for something more than just power. They were searching for meaning, for change, and that was something Jace could relate to. That evening, Jace was summoned to the Queen's private chambers. His heart skipped a beat. He had no idea what Ariana wanted, but he knew it couldn't be good. She had been watching him closely, and he had the sense that she didn't trust him any more than she had before. When he entered, the Queen was sitting at a large desk, reviewing documents. Her expression was as unreadable as ever. She didn't look up as he entered, but he could feel her gaze on him as if it were a weight. "You've been speaking with my daughters," Ariana said, her voice cold. "What did you discuss?" Jace stood tall, not backing down. "We talked about the future, about peace." The Queen's eyes flickered with something, surprise maybe, but she quickly masked it, her face returning to its usual stone-like expression. "See?" she said softly. "And what do you think, human? Do you think peace is possible?" Jace hesitated. "I think it's the only way forward. We've seen what war does. The cost is too high. We can't keep fighting." Ariana finally looked up, her gaze piercing. "Then why should I trust you?" Jace met her gaze firmly. "Because I'm not here to fight. I'm here to build something better for both of us." Ariana regarded him for a long moment. Then slowly she stood, walking toward him. "You may have just convinced me to give you a chance," she said quietly. "But know this, if you fail, there will be no mercy." Jace nodded. He had expected no less from the Queen. But for the first time he felt as though he might have a real chance to change the future, not just for himself but for the Xylo people as well. The days after Jace's conversation with the Queen were tense. There was no clear agreement yet, but something had shifted. The Queen was still cautious, her trust not easily earned, but at least she had given him a chance to prove himself. Jace's situation in the palace was delicate. He was no longer just a prisoner, but neither was he a guest. He had become a symbol, of hope for some and a threat for others. The palace itself was a labyrinth, both in design and in politics. The corridors were vast, stretching endlessly like the minds of the people who walked them. The air was thick with secrets, and Jace was quickly realizing that nothing was as simple as it seemed. The Queen, for all her power, was facing challenges from within her own court. And the most dangerous of these challenges came from within her own family. Zara had continued to visit Jace in secret, often slipping away from her royal duties to talk to him. She was still uncertain, still questioning everything she had been taught. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was a need for answers. She wanted to know if peace was truly possible, if the Xylo could break free from their long history of conflict. Every time they spoke, Jace felt the weight of the situation on his shoulders. It was clear she was torn between loyalty to her mother and her growing doubts about the system she was born into. But Jace was beginning to see that the Queen's real enemy wasn't just the humans, it was the very people closest to her. One evening, as Jace walked through the palace gardens, a quiet voice called out to him. He turned quickly, his hand instinctively reaching for the small weapon he had been given for protection, just in case. It was Nyla. She stood in the shadows, her face barely visible, her eyes shining in the dim light. "Jace," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "I need to talk to you." Jace stepped closer, his voice low. "What's going on, Nyla? Why are you out here alone?" "I couldn't risk being seen," she replied, her voice shaking slightly. I think something's wrong. There are rumors in the palace. My mother, she's not telling us everything, and the rebels, they're getting closer." Jace's heart raced. He had heard whispers of a rebellion, but he had dismissed them as nothing more than background noise. Now, standing in front of Nyla, he realized the situation was more dangerous than he had imagined. "What are you saying?" Jace asked, his voice tense. "The Queen isn't as strong as she seems." Nyla continued, her gaze dropping to the ground. "There are those who are close to her, trusted advisors, generals, who want to use this war as an excuse to take over. They don't care about peace. They only care about power." Jace's mind raced. The Queen's power was not just in her strength. It was in her ability to control the factions within her court. If those in her inner circle were plotting against her, then everything Jace had worked for could fall apart in an instant. "Do you know who they are?" Jace asked, his voice steady but urgent. Nyla nodded, her eyes dark with fear. "Yes, it's General Solace. He's the Queen's most trusted advisor, but he's not loyal to her. He's been working with the rebels, stirring them up, and he's using his position to manipulate her." Jace's stomach twisted. General Solace was a name he had heard in passing. A decorated war hero, a man of immense influence. It seemed impossible that someone so close to the Queen would betray her. But Nyla's words rang true. If the general was working with the rebels, the entire fate of the planet could be at risk. "I need to tell the Queen," Jace said urgently. "This can't wait." Nyla grabbed his arm, stopping him. "No, you can't go to her right now, not yet." "Why not?" Jace asked, confused. "Because Solace has eyes everywhere. He's already watching the Queen, and he's watching us. If you make a move now, he'll know, and he'll use it against you, against all of us." Jace felt the weight of the situation sink in. The rebellion was closer than he had thought, and the very people the Queen trusted were the ones plotting her downfall. Nyla was right. If he acted too quickly, it could jeopardize everything. But if he did nothing, the Queen might lose control of her empire before they had a chance to work together for peace. "What do you suggest we do?" Jace asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We need to gather more information," Nyla said, her eyes determined. "I've been overhearing conversations. Solace has been meeting with key members of the council, people who are already leaning toward the rebels. We can't just confront him, but we can start by watching him. I'll help you." Jace nodded, his mind racing. He had always been a soldier, trained to take action, to lead in moments of crisis. But this was different. This wasn't just a fight. It was a battle of wits, and one wrong move could cost him everything. "All right," Jace said. "We'll move carefully, but we need to act fast. If Solace is as dangerous as you say, we can't afford to wait too long." Nyla gave him a brief, grateful smile. "I'll help you. I know my mother doesn't trust me, but she's not the only one with power. I can get us information. But we have to be smart about it." Jace felt a sense of resolve building inside him. Nyla had been right, all along. The Queen's enemies were close, and they were more dangerous than he had imagined. But with her help and Zara's support, they might just be able to expose the conspiracy before it was too late. Over the next few days, Jace and Nyla began their quiet investigation. They met in secret, exchanged information, and carefully watched the movements of General Solace. The more they uncovered, the more Jace realized how deeply the rebellion had infiltrated the Queen's court. Solace was not only working with the rebels, he was manipulating the council members, planting seeds of doubt in their minds. He was a master strategist, playing the Queen's court like a game of chess. Jace knew they had to act quickly, but he also knew that every step they took would bring them closer to danger. If they were caught, there would be no way out. As Jace and Nyla continued to gather information, the feeling of impending danger grew stronger. It was no longer just about peace. It was about survival. If they couldn't stop Solace and the rebels, everything they had worked for would be lost, and the Xylo Empire would be plunged into chaos. The palace had never felt more like a prison to Jace. Every day the walls seemed to close in around him, the pressure mounting as they inched closer to the heart of the conspiracy. His alliance with Nyla had become their only source of strength. They had uncovered more details, more whispers, but still no concrete evidence to expose General Solace for what he truly was. The web of deceit was thicker than they had imagined, and every step they took brought them closer to danger. Jace knew. It was only a matter of time before someone noticed the unusual meetings between him and Nyla. The Queen had not yet acted on their findings, but time was running out. The rebellion was growing stronger by the day, and Solus was playing his cards well. With each new piece of information they gathered, Jace couldn't help but feel more trapped. He had been sent here to build peace, but now he was tangled in a war he hadn't asked for. One evening, after yet another secret meeting with Nyla, Jace found himself alone in the palace courtyard. The stars above were clearer than any he had ever seen on Earth. The air was still, and the silence was almost comforting. But Jace knew that peace for him was temporary. The choices before him were becoming clearer, but they didn't get easier. He turned as he heard soft footsteps approaching. It was Zara. "Jace," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "We need to talk." He could see the worry in her eyes as she stepped closer. It wasn't the kind of worry a princess should show, yet it was there, unmistakable. Jace could sense the shift in her demeanor. She wasn't just the future queen anymore. She was someone who had begun to question everything she had known. "About Solus?" Jace asked, already knowing the answer. Zara nodded. "Yes, I spoke with my mother again. I tried to convince her to listen to you, to take action, but she won't. She believes Solus is loyal. She won't believe me. And she won't believe you." Jace felt a heavy weight in his chest. "I don't understand. Why won't she listen?" "She's afraid," Zara said softly, looking away for a moment as if gathering her thoughts. "She's afraid that if she admits she's wrong about him, she'll lose everything. Her throne, her power, her control. She's surrounded by people who only tell her what she wants to hear. People like Solus." "Then what do we do?" Jace asked. "We can't just wait and hope it gets better. The rebels are getting closer. Solus is playing both sides, and we're running out of time." Zara looked up at him, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of determination and fear. "I don't want to lose my mother, but I don't want to lose our future either." Jace studied her closely. The weight of the situation hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to break. Zara was caught between loyalty to her mother and the possibility of something better. Jace felt the same pull, torn between his duty to his people and the hope that things could be different for the Xylo. "You have a choice to make, Zara," Jace said quietly. "Your mother will never change unless she sees the truth. And I'm afraid that if we don't act soon, it'll be too late for all of us." Zara's gaze flickered to the horizon, her face troubled. "I know. But if I speak out now, if I turn against my mother, I risk everything. I risk my people, my position, my family. I don't know if I'm ready to make that choice." Jace stepped closer, his voice soft but urgent. "I understand, Zara. But sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that save us. You have to decide if you're willing to lose everything to save your people, or if you're willing to let everything fall apart just to keep things the way they are." Zara stood silent for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. Then with a deep breath she nodded. "You're right. We can't keep ignoring the truth." A sudden noise from behind them interrupted their conversation. Jace's hand went to his side instinctively, his fingers brushing the hilt of the weapon he'd been given for protection. But when he turned, he saw the familiar figure of Nyla emerging from the shadows. "You're not alone in this," Nyla said, her voice quiet but filled with conviction. "We'll act together." Jace felt a rush of relief. He wasn't alone. Zara and Nyla had both made their choice. They were willing to fight for a future they believed in, even if it meant facing their own mother. The rebellion wasn't just a threat from the outside. It was a battle within the palace walls, within the very heart of the royal family, and Jace was now an unwilling part of that fight. "We'll have to move fast," Jace said, his voice resolute. "Solus won't let us expose him without a fight, but if we're careful, we can do it. We can make the truth known before it's too late." Zara nodded, her expression hardening with determination. "Then we do it tonight. No more waiting." The three of them quickly made their way through the palace, moving in the shadows to avoid detection. It wasn't just about Solus anymore. It was about the future of the Xylo, about ensuring that the Queen's reign didn't end in bloodshed and betrayal. When they reached the council chamber, Jace could feel the tension in the air. They had to act quickly before anyone noticed they were gone. Zara stepped forward, her voice steady but firm. "We have the proof we need," she said. "We have enough to show that Solus has been working with the rebels. He's been manipulating the council, creating a false sense of security while plotting against us. The Queen can't ignore this any longer." Jace turned to Nyla, who nodded, in agreement. The time had come. The future of the Xylo would be decided in this very room. As the door to the council chamber opened, Jace felt the weight of the moment. They had made their choice. And now, there was no turning back. The council chamber was bathed in the soft glow of the palace lights. Jace, Zara, and Nyla stood together in the doorway, their resolve firm as they prepared to confront General Solus. The air in the room was thick with tension. This was it. The moment that could change everything for the Xylo Empire. If they failed, it would be a disaster for both the royal family and the future of the planet. Jace's mind raced, but his expression remained calm. This wasn't just about the Queen anymore. It wasn't just about peace between their worlds. It was about stopping a rebellion from within, a plot to tear apart everything the Queen had built. Zara stepped forward, her posture straight and proud, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. It wasn't fear. It was the uncertainty that came with making the hardest decision of her life. She had been raised to follow her mother's commands, to honor the power and authority of the royal family. But today, that loyalty was being tested. If she did nothing, she would become part of the system she had come to question. If she acted, she could lose everything: her family, her title, her place in the palace. Jace placed a hand on her shoulder, offering silent support. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly. Zara nodded, taking a deep breath. "I know," she said, her voice firm. "And I won't." With a swift motion, she pushed open the doors to the council chamber. The room was filled with the most trusted members of the Xylo court, the people who held the real power: counselors, military leaders, and advisors. General Solus was standing at the head of the table, his back turned as he spoke with one of the counselors. The moment he saw the three of them enter, he froze, his expression shifting into a cold mask of suspicion. "Princess Zara, Princess Nyla, and the human," Solus said, his voice dripping with disdain. "What is this? What do you think you're doing here?" Zara didn't hesitate. "We're here to expose the truth," she said, her voice unwavering. There was a murmur of surprise among the council members. Solus narrowed his eyes, clearly aware that things were about to change. "Expose the truth?" he repeated, his tone mocking. "What truth are you talking about?" Nyla stepped forward, her voice quiet but full of authority. "The truth that you've been working with the rebels, that you've been manipulating this council, spreading lies to ensure that the rebellion succeeds." Jace stood beside Nyla, his eyes scanning the room. He could see the shock in the eyes of the other council members, but there were a few who didn't look surprised at all. They had been part of Solus's plan all along. Solus's face twisted in anger. "You have no proof," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You're just a child, Zara. And you, Nyla, you're just a puppet for this human. You think you can change things? You think the council will stand by you?" Zara's expression remained hard, but her voice was steady. "I don't need the council's approval. The truth speaks for itself. And if you continue down this path, there will be no throne left for any of us." Solus took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can threaten me?" he spat. "You are nothing without your mother's crown. And once I'm done, there will be no more royalty, no more crown for anyone." For a moment, there was silence. Jace could feel the tension in the air, the weight of Solus's words hanging heavy. The general was a man of power, of influence. But Zara was right. He had lost the support of the people who mattered most. The truth was on their side. "You've already lost," Jace said, his voice calm but firm. "The rebellion will never succeed. Not while the truth is still standing. And your lies will only take you so far." Solas's eyes flicked toward the counselors, gauging their reactions. Some looked uncomfortable, others defiant. The room was divided, but one thing was clear. Solas was losing control, and it was only a matter of time before the rest of the council saw him for what he truly was. "I won't go down without a fight," Solas said, his voice cold with determination. "But neither will you." Just as Solas moved to make a gesture, a low, deep voice interrupted him. The queen had entered the room. Ariana stood in the doorway, her posture regal, her expression unreadable. The air seemed to shift when she stepped inside. The council members fell silent, and even Solas hesitated. "Enough," Ariana said, her voice carrying the weight of her authority. "I've heard enough." The queen's eyes moved across the room, settling on Solas. "You've been plotting against me, haven't you?" she asked, her voice calm but filled with venom. "I trusted you. I trusted you with the future of this empire," Solas swallowed, his arrogance faltering for the first time. "Your Majesty, this is all a misunderstanding. I was only trying to protect the Xylo." "Protect the Xylo?" Ariana repeated, her voice dangerously low. "You've been using your position to manipulate the very people you swore to protect. You've been sowing the seeds of rebellion. And now, you think you can lie your way out of it?" Jace could see the change in the queen's expression. There was no longer any hesitation in her eyes. She had seen the truth, and she was ready to act. "The rebellion ends here," Ariana declared. "Solas, you are no longer part of this empire. You will be held accountable for your actions." Solas looked around the room, his expression twisted, in disbelief. "You can't do this," he snarled. "I am the one who has kept this empire together. Without me, you'll fall." Ariana stepped forward, her presence overwhelming. "I have kept this empire together, and I will rebuild it, with those who truly care about its future." With a sharp motion, she signaled her guards, who stepped forward to seize Solas. The general struggled briefly, but was quickly overpowered. As he was dragged out of the room, the council members watched in stunned silence. Jace turned to Zara and Neela, who were both watching their mother with a mixture of awe and relief. The queen had made her choice, and the empire would follow her lead. "I told you," Jace said softly. "The truth always finds a way." Zara smiled, a sense of hope filling her eyes. "It's not just the truth that won today. It's the will to change, the desire for something better." The queen turned to her daughters, her gaze softening for the first time since Jace had met her. "You were right," Ariana said quietly. "This empire is not built on lies. It's built on the strength of its people, on honesty and trust." Jace watched as the queen embraced her daughters, a new understanding passing between them. This was only the beginning. There was much work to be done and many challenges ahead. But for the first time, Jace felt that peace was no longer just a dream. It was a possibility. As the council room emptied and the three of them stood together, Jace knew that this was a new dawn, not just for the Xylo, but for everyone who believed in the power of truth and the strength to make a difference.